The UK theatre industry is a big part of British culture, with over 34 million people attending shows all across the country each year. However, when COVID-19 hit, all of that changed. Theatre closures and many cancellations caused unpredicted challenges, which left many people in the industry unsure of their future. Over the next 20 minutes, we're going to explore the specific impacts of the pandemic on the industry and the effects of the people working within it. When the pandemic first hit, it came as a shock and left everyone uncertain. Suddenly the industry was wiped out and everyone had to adapt very quickly. I went to go see some people in the industry to see what their experiences were.
I think like every other industry, it was surreal and shocking. You felt like you were in a sci-fi movie, except you hadn't read the last few pages of the script. You didn't know whether it was going to end happily or not, but it was immensely frightening. I mean, the world stopped. Everything stopped. There were no plays. There was sort of talking about, we might do something if it's through in a few weeks, but of course it wasn't in a few weeks. It was not even going to be in a few months, and even when it did, it then came back about 8 weeks later and landed a right hook and put the whole world back into lockdown again. So I think for theatre, it's been the most terrible blow.
During COVID, I think there was a big financial issue with people being self-employed and stuff, and being an actor is hard as it is, and I think COVID was tricky for loads of people and loads of families, especially if you were part of a performing arts sort of family.
I think what happened after COVID is there were a lot of changes that we saw within our industry. So one of the things that we were very proud of was we were able to get into the room with a casting director where we could talk like this, and then we could read a script and you're actually being real. What happened after COVID was that those opportunities didn't happen anymore, and are still not happening now. So that's had a knock-on effect to me as an actor and also to everyone else, in that now all that we can do is self-tapes. So we have to self-tape ourselves and then send that in and then hope that something comes on the back of it. But that doesn't help you as an actor in any way, because you don't have any notes, you don't have any feedback. You read it in a way that you think is right and it gets sent off, but that's it. You don't even know if they've watched it. So that's been tough, because at least if you were in the room with people, you could potentially gauge that feeling. But now it's so sterile and it's so sort of impersonal that it makes it very difficult.
During COVID, we couldn't, on some jobs, I couldn't even touch them. So on some jobs, they literally have a bag in front of them. We would stand and say, can you put that there, and can you put that there, and that hair's out of place, so could you do that with your hair? So that was quite hard. I literally got paid for holding a mirror saying, can you do that and move that there? That was interesting. I mean, it was good because it helped you realise how tough your job is, because it's quite quick for me to just go in and go, right, that's done, whereas I'm going, no, not that bit, this bit, can you? And that was, so checks got a little bit longer than they should, which was, I mean, that was an experience to do that.
Theatre was just finished, and a producer, not the producer of the show, but a producer was talking to me one night. He came to see the show, and he said that because of the nature of provincial theatres, 90% of all the bookings that you take in a provincial theatre are in the days after the leaflet announcing the season has plopped through your letterbox. So there's these big mailing lists of people who always go to the theatre, and they pick it up off the mat. They say, oh look, that's on this week, that's on that week, that's on one. Let's book for 5 shows, and that's how it used to happen. That has completely been finished by COVID. That thing of people saying, I'll book for 5 shows because they all look in. Everybody now, particularly outside London, is much more nervous about going to the theatre. I think particularly elderly people are really nervous about it now.
Sort of 70% of the theatre going audience are over the age of 65, and theatres are dying because audiences aren't still going. There are a lot of people in that age bracket who used to go to matinees and lots of performances who don't go anymore because they're still scared of COVID. They're still scared to leave the house, and they're still scared to go into an area that's full of other people in an indoor environment. So theatre has struggled immensely and still does, and that's why you're seeing so many theatres dark and why so many theatres are closing down. Link that with the funding aspect from government, and theatre really is in a bad place. You're always going to have big tickets on West End shows like Wicked and Les Mis and things like that, because they're juggernauts. But independent theatres, or theatres that have touring shows that come into them, I try and go to theatre as often as I can, and it's very rarely I see houseful signs out, or look around the auditorium and not see loads of gaps, and that's a real shame. So I think still, even now, we're seeing the knock-on effect of COVID, and producers are, rightly so, I guess, reluctant to put their hands in their pockets to put shows on, not knowing if they're even going to break even.
Small independent theatres would have been impacted in a similar way to how John explained. I spoke to the Kenton Theatre to see what it was like for them.
My name's Sam Shepherd. I'm the marketing and publicity manager for the Kenton Theatre. The theatre was operating perfectly normally back then. We had lots of gigs, lots of comedy, panto and all that kind of thing. Everything was going swimmingly, basically. First thing is we had to close the doors, so there was no audiences whatsoever. And at that point, it was more, how do we keep the theatre running? Because obviously there's still running costs, and what are we going to do? So we started the Kenton for Keeps campaign. We did some online shows, which were okay. They weren't brilliantly attended, because it's quite a new concept and quite a strange thing to do. But we tried our best to try and keep people engaged with the theatre during COVID. Some of it worked and some of it didn't, but it was a new thing, so no one really knew how to behave and what the answer was really. We thought online would be a way forward.
Once people started to come back, and it looked as though we were clear. So it was sort of the summertime. People got more confident, and we had a good showing just before Christmas. And people just wanted to come. They wanted to go out, and it was sufficient incentive to make people want to come out. And so it was that really kicked it off again.
The first thing we did was distance shows, so we had to basically cut the audience in half, which means you're always on a loser with the size of venue that we are. But we thought it was important to encourage people back to the theatre anyway. So that's the first thing we did. We had reduced capacity so we could distance people properly and try and keep people safe, and then we had like staggered times to pick up tickets and that kind of thing. And I think really the other thing we did was just try and put on good shows to encourage people back. People are still behaving in a strange way. I mean, it's changed audience behaviour considerably. There's a group that I sort of liaise with around the country, and they're saying that people are buying tickets later for shows in case they get ill or in case the show doesn't go ahead or that kind of thing.
It's changed from people booking months in advance, which we used to get, to be booking in the last 2-3 weeks before a show, and actually in the last week before a show quite frequently, because for a long time we refunded people who cancelled because they had COVID, but that stopped sometime earlier on this year. I can't remember the date exactly. And as soon as everybody stopped doing that, then that made people put off booking more because they didn't want to lose their ticket money.
You have to hold your nerve quite a bit. So I think that's the biggest one. It's the change in audience behaviour, which we thought would go back to being how it was before, but it doesn't seem to be showing any signs of doing that just yet. So, COVID's really affected the way people behave.
As much as theatres did struggle, parts of the industry adapted it in many great ways.
The impact that COVID had on society has been a really interesting one for our industry, because there's definitely now an audience who can be at home and enjoy it from the comfort of their own room. There are still productions that are online, and there's National Theatre at home. You know, the NT Live, so there'd be the National Theatre and they'd do a cinema viewing of theatre, which is great because there are so many people who love theatre and they can't get there and they have to travel far and the expense of it all. So yeah, there's in many ways it's been a really positive experience in the long run, and the side effects have been great in the fact that yes, there's so many more platforms and now you've got more choices.
I like the fact that things are online. I think it means that people who live further away have got a better chance of travelling, like better chance of getting auditions and getting roles. Because I'm from Sheffield originally, so when I did live at home in Sheffield, it was like, you know, paying £80 to get on a train to London to go and get seen for 5 minutes, to get back on the train and go home. It's a lot to ask of people, so I think it's a lot more affordable.
It's amazing to me that the industry has even been able to get back on its feet, and full testimony to everybody that's managed to keep it going, because we really nearly lost it for a while, and there was a period in darkest COVID when I thought, am I ever going to hear the laughter of a live audience again?
There's nothing like live theatre. Live theatre is incredible to watch. You're looking and watching people earning their crust by showing you their craft and their skills on a stage in a very intimate environment. Sometimes you can be within touching distance of seeing idols on stage, you know, Hollywood stars, and so I think, you know, to be able to have that and experience that is an incredible thing.
You need to go out there and go to the theatre.